Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Gruddick, and here we are this afternoon to talk about the Entertainment Barometer. I'm a faculty lecturer at McGill School of Continuing Studies and in the supply chain and logistics program. And I also have a great interest in the world of entertainment. And I am very honored today to introduce you to Florent Bayle. Florent is Florent Bayle-Labouré. And Florent is a very, very interesting person who's done a lot of work in the entertainment industry to try to understand how the industry is evolving and where some of the issues are that should be of interest to everybody that's got anything to do with the world of entertainment. A bit of background on Florent: he's got about 15 years of experience in brand management and marketing in entertainment, media, and telecoms. Starting his career with advertising agencies, he joined the Cirque du Soleil, where he became in charge of the management of the brand globally and orchestrated diversification of the Cirque du Soleil brand. From there, he took on the vice president role of the Fido brand in Canada, one of the main telco brands, and then the head of marketing for Mishmash, a Montreal-based investment firm with interests in various media and entertainment companies. Florent holds 2 bachelor's degrees, one a marketing and management from France, and an international business degree from England. He also holds a master's degree in marketing from HEC Montreal. So welcome, Florent, to the webinar.
Yep.
Much appreciate your time and your investment in getting people to better understand the Entertainment Barometer. So I will pass it over to you, Florent, without any further ado. And if anybody has any questions that you would like to pose to Florent as he goes through the presentation, please use the chat box that you see at the bottom of your screen. Just click on the chat box, type in your chat questions, and I'll be managing and orchestrating the questions to Florent as they come in. So please remember to use the chat, and then at the end of the session, we'll probably have an open Q&A if we have time left. That'll allow you to basically ask some general questions of Florent on his presentation or on his career. And I'll probably talk to you a bit about the McGill program on entertainment and how we want you to get more involved in that program as time goes on. So Florent, over to you, sir.
Perfect. Thank you very much, John. Good morning, everyone. Let me share my screen before we start. And John, let me know if everything looks good on your end. If it does, it should work for everyone else. All good?
We're good.
Perfect. Excellent. All right, so good morning. A pleasure to be with you all this morning. So my name is Florent. I won't do the intro that John went through. Thank you for that, John. Just a couple things in addition to what John was saying. So yes, I've spent a big chunk of my career in the world of entertainment quite broadly. 2 years ago, I've launched a studio called Habo. We're based in Montreal, and just a few things on who we are so you understand where this project of the Entertainment Barometer came from. Basically, what we do in life is we're helping companies, and brands in many different industries basically deliver on their business objectives. What makes us kind of unique is that Habo was founded by 2 persons, so myself and my co-founder. I'm marketing and he's finance. We actually met back when we both were at Cirque du Soleil. Usually in organizations, marketing and finance are kind of cats and dogs. They usually don't love each other for many reasons. I think finance thinks marketing is spending way too much money, and marketing thinks finance is cutting budgets, and that's all they do. And I'm oversimplifying it a bit, but that's the gist of the relationship. However, what him and I saw is that when marketing and finance work well together, there is magic happening. And this is arguably the main pillars of an organization is basically marketing and finance in most organizations, not all of them, but many of them. And so we've built a studio to accompany brands and organizations with that duality of perspective, basically top line, bottom line, the consumer perspective and the business model perspective, marketing, finance. So that duality is very present in everything we do. And we do everything, many things from, strategic planning. So it could be we're working with lots of organizations on coming up with like writing their 5-year plan, are working on a plan to launch a new product, but we're also working with them in depth with market and consumer intelligence, which we call strategic intelligence. So basically really understanding consumers, understanding markets before you make an action. Most of our clients are in the creative industry, in the lifestyle industry, and in consumer goods. But because of our background, of course, the creative industry is very central in everything we do. Just a few clients that we've worked with, just so you understand the type of clients that we work with typically. We've worked with people from, so Lune Rouge is a big client of ours. So the McGill Liberté investment fund, who was also doing PY1, the pyramid in the old part of Montreal last year. We're working with Picnic Electronic and Igloo Fest. We're working with some cultural organizations as well. We're working with Phi Center, and that's in Montreal, but we also have lots of projects in the US, especially on Broadway. We've worked with 30 something shows so far, from Moulin Rouge to Hamilton, School of Rock, Jagged Little Pill. So we have a pretty broad perspective of entertainment and what we call the creative industry as a whole. Again, any questions on as we go along, please feel free to ask them in the chat. If I go too fast, if I go too slow, let us know as well. John will help us with this. And so a few weeks ago, all of this basically creative industry was put on pause, kind of almost like, you know, immediately. And some of our clients on Broadway basically saw their shows being canceled. Some of our clients here in Quebec were in complete darkness. And so our immediate reaction in those situations is to say, okay, well, then we need to make sure we keep our hands on the pulse of the consumer, because if we go a direction and everyone else goes in another direction, we as organizations go in a direction and consumers go in a different way, we're soon going to be completely disconnected from this market. And one of our clients is a ticketing platform called thepointofsale.com, lepointdevente.com. And they came to us and said, could you help us find a way to help the industry and our clients navigate through this moment of darkness and clarity and uncertainty for sure. So that's how we said, okay, let's create a project where basically we could actually track the evolution of consumers' attitude towards entertainment in the next few months. And we've launched the first edition of this tracking in April 2020. So basically 2 months ago, we launched the second edition in May. And the third one will be released in a few weeks. We're actually in field right now for June. The idea, we don't know whether we're going to keep on doing this project for 6 months, 3 months, a year. All of this will depend on the evolution of consumers and also the evolution of the marketplace. We're looking into extending this project into the US and other territories. But for now, what we've done so far is really collect consumers' sentiment, if you'd like, towards entertainment to get a better understanding of what's going on and also help the industry make better decisions. So this is in a nutshell what the barometer is. The way that we're doing it is basically we're collecting every month about 1,000 respondents, which is a pretty robust sample. We're using actually a database from our clients actually. So the lepointdevente.com have hundreds of thousands of names of people who bought tickets to festivals, concerts, exhibitions, conferences, name it, in the last 3 years. Actually, they have a database much bigger than that, but we've only pulled out data from the last 3 years. So at least we knew we'd be speaking to people who consume entertainment. And then what we've done is we've built, because this is not a representative sample, if you like, of the population, we've basically structured a sample that looks like the Quebec population. So we have quotas in terms of gender, age, or where people live to make sure that this quota or this sample, if you'd like, is a good snapshot of the Quebec population. And that's how we've been working in the last 2 editions and how we'll continue working with the upcoming editions. again, making sure that whatever we create looks like Quebecers in a nutshell. So everyone who participates in this study has basically purchased tickets, is consuming entertainment, has actually consumed paid entertainment in the last 12 months. And this is the methodology that we've been using in this research. So far, so good. I hope everyone's following. John, any questions, or everyone's good so far? Perfect. So what we're going to be looking at today is actually a few things. And John, I think there is a question maybe on the chat, or someone raised their hand. So if you want to check what's going on that front. In the meantime, this is basically what we'll be talking about today. We'll be first going through the mindset of consumers today. And actually we'll look at how was it different, in April versus May, and it will be also interesting to, in a few weeks, see how this will evolve in June and so on and so forth. So we'll look at that. Then we'll also discuss mitigation measures. For many people in the industry, the main question that we got was, well, okay, but what can I do? Like, what can I say to consumers to reassure them and help them navigate also through a return to normality, if normality is even something that we can envision today. So we'll look into that. And three, another big question that we got from the industry and our clients is, well, if I cannot, put on a show, if I cannot have people visiting my museum, or if I cannot organize a festival as I was supposed to, can I shift everything towards online? And is there a potential for that? So we'll look into that as well. Most of the content you'll see today, except the last piece, which will be released next week. So everything you're seeing today is kind of a preview of that. But most of the content is available on abo.studio/insight. So you'll find the content for this specific project in that URL. So feel free to go there. You can also download lots of reports on that. So if ever you'd like more information, more is available on our site. If not, again, the content you'll see today is a good overview of everything that you'll find on the website. John, did you have any questions on the chat?
No, everybody's just anxious to see some of your results. That's
okay.
And I told them the results are coming up.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let's talk about results actually. So let's talk about the mindset of entertainment consumer, of the entertainment consumer in Quebec. The first thing we looked at was, well, do people even miss entertainment, and to what extent, and how much do they miss consuming entertainment? And also, are there some type of entertainment activities that people miss more than others? And so this is what we got. What you actually want to look at in this graph is the dark red section. What today people miss the most, and this is data from the month of May, is actually going to the restaurant, going to a live music concert, or going to a festival. These three things are extremely strong in terms of like a perception of deprivation of entertainment activities. And actually, so these three things are again very strongly missed by consumers. Some others are not missed as much. Things like multimedia experiences, amusement park, aquarium, zoos, educational museums. What we see actually here in the list of activities is basically what you see on the right side, which is basically things that people miss less than others. Are things that people don't consume as often as they would. So like restaurant is something that people consume quite regularly, whereas amusement park is maybe something people go to once a year, unless you're in an 18-25 age group. So that's the first thing we've noticed. So basically there seems to be a correlation between how much you miss things versus your frequency of consumption. The other thing we see, and that's what you see in the gray bars underneath, is the evolution 1 month versus another. So basically when you see plus 10 points for restaurant, it means that in the month of May, 51% of the people we spoke to were missing going to the restaurant a lot. And this is plus 10 points versus the month of April. So basically April was 41% of a lot. So we went from 41 to 51. So it's a plus 10 points on restaurant. So basically overall, for most entertainment activities, the fact of not being able to consume entertainment has exacerbated the feeling of deprivation. So that's interesting to see that entertainment does play a very central role in consumers' lives. And
one question I think, one question we're getting is on
yeah.
the multimedia one and looking at, you know, the least amount of consumption or least amount of deprivation. Does that multimedia experience include things like video games and Netflix?
No, this was described as experiences that combine lights, sounds, projections. So think of Aura in the Basilica of Montreal, or think of things that Moment Factory would be doing, or think of like, well, PY1 to some extent was also kind of in the same idea. So it'd be experiences that combine all those things together. We didn't test Netflix because people could consume it. We've looked at video games, but not in as much details as what you have on that page.
Got it. Thank you.
All good? Yeah. So anyways, I think the main idea of that page says, so one, there are some entertainment activities that people miss more than others. Number two, that feeling of deprivation has strongly increased between April and May. We'll see how June, in which direction June goes. Also interesting to see that for Quebecers, festivals was also very strongly missed. And so we are a culture of festival. All of this was sample was collected, you know, while all those festivals were being canceled. So of course, that certainly has impacted the number of people missing festivals.
What about theater? And a question about, was theater not considered a category?
Yes, actually it's under play. So we called it play to be specific because we have plays and musicals, which is the broader category of theater. So play was our label, if you'd like, for that.
Yeah, one last question was, you know, in terms of regionalization, is this, you know, a Montreal phenomenon, a Montreal cut, or is this a province cut?
So it's a province. So we've looked at data, you know, throughout the province. So we have the Montreal region, the Quebec region, and the other regions, which are three subsets in our data set. What is interesting is the data is actually quite consistent, whether you look at Montreal, Quebec City, or other regions. So this is relatively true for any and all regions in Quebec.
And across age groups as well?
Yeah, so we have, if you go into the decks on the website, you'll see some splits. So of course, things like bars and nightclubs were more the feeling of deprivation was higher amongst younger consumers, obviously. But there are some differences. I won't go into them in details today, but you'll find them on the full report on the website.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All good? So moving on. The other thing we looked at is now, okay, well, people may be missing entertainment, but I mean, would they be concerned you know, going into a museum or a festival today? And so that's what we see here. So basically the dark red is, or dark orange is actually, I would be very worried. Light orange being I'd be somewhat worried, and the green is I'd be not worried at all, or not very worried to consume any of these activities. So what we see at the top of the chart is basically things that people would be very comfortable consuming today. And so here you find art and design museums, aquarium and zoos, educational museums, to some extent multimedia experiences as well. What we see is basically here you have two types of venues. You have either museums, which I guess in the mind of consumers are easy to imagine how you can have social distancing in a museum. And the other thing is, you know, things like aquarium and zoo, also probably an idea that, you know, I can be quite spread out, you know, and I wouldn't risk of being, you know, close to people too much, as opposed to amusement parks, which currently 75% of consumers in Quebec would be very worried going to an amusement park. Musicals, live music concerts, bars and nightclubs, festivals, sporting events. All those things are today a real challenge, to basically, if we were to convince someone to go to a festival today, it'd be quite challenging.
The other question was asking on dance as to whether dance, what is that category? Is it performance only or things like dance classes?
This was the dance performances. So again, here the labels are shortened, but the full statement was a dance performance, ballet or classic or modern dance. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So dance. So weirdly, I mean, this one is a bit oddly placed in the list of things. That being said, again, if I had to guess, and sometimes in consumer research you have to use your intuition and also knowledge of the industry. Dance. Not all dance shows are very big. Productions in large theaters. There's lots of smaller dance productions that may be taking place in smaller theaters, as opposed to a musical, which in consumers' head is probably Place des Arts type of venue. So that's what we see. But the good news is what we see also is most of the level of concern actually for all of those activities has decreased in between April and May. So here again, the points here, the variance is a number of points of very and somewhat worried. April versus May. So as an example, I'll take art and design museums as an example. So 40% of people would be today either very or somewhat worried, but this is minus 19 points versus last month. So last month, that same number was at 69. So basically we see that there is, a feeling of back to normal that is encouraging when you see the evolution month after month of the level of concern. All good? However, despite the fact that the level of concern is decreasing, we've also asked people, well, in how many months would you feel comfortable? And actually the question was being comfortable, not, would you be willing to go back? But when would you feel comfortable in your mind, going back to a museum, going back to a festival? And what we see here is, so again, logically, museums are the two things, whether educational museums or art and design museums, are the two things that people would be very confident going back to quite quickly. The restaurants actually are somewhat, also not too much of a concern for consumers, and also in terms of when they project, a return to normal, not too far off. But festivals, things like circus shows, amusement park, live music concerts, we're looking at 6 months ahead of time to basically reach a level of comfort. What's interesting on that page as well is what you see again on the right side is also the evolution April versus May. Because the wave of May happened basically logically 1 month after the wave of April, everything should have dropped by 1 month, right? So if you told me that you'd be comfortable going back to a museum in 3 months in the month of May, logically that 3 months should have been 2 months if I had asked you the same question in the month of May, so 1 month later. And actually, so two of those entertainment activities do respect that logic. So museums mostly, and aquariums and zoos, but a lot of them basically didn't really move in terms of your projection in how many months before a level of comfort, which still indicates that this perception of when am I going to be comfortable going to a festival hasn't really moved between April and May. So again, it will be interesting to see how that will evolve in June. So stay tuned for the results that will be published early July, so in 2 weeks. And all of those things together, well, sorry, just one thing before, there is still a certain segment of the population that would be still willing to go back to any of those activities today. And that's what you see in the dark green section here. So as an example, like today, if you ask people, when you think you'll be comfortable going back to a museum, you have 40% of people saying, yes, I'd be willing to go back today. If you look at art museum, 39%, so very, very consistent. If you look at plays, as an example, in the middle of the graph, 25%. So you still have a section of consumers that today would be willing to go back to see a play. So The message here is not that there's no way people will go back to a play today. Yes, but 25% only. On the other end of the spectrum, on the right side, so the dark red, some of the activities actually seem kind of a no-go for most people in the short term. Amusement parks, 32% of people, would say 12 months and more, and festivals also. Keeping in mind here again, because of the question of gender and age, that we're looking, at the general population. So if we were to zoom in on millennials or Gen Zs, obviously you'd see that festivals, the level of concern of these generations is much lower. So you'd have way more people willing to go back next month. But when you look at the population overall, this is what it says.
How would you explain the decrease for missing a classical concert?
Sorry, what was your question? Sorry, I missed
How
that.
would you explain the decrease in missing a classical concert? If you look at the previous slide for a second.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So, you're basically talking about people, are missing a classical concert, and there's less and less people who are missing that classical concert. How would you explain that?
Well, so this slide is not actually the how much they miss going to a classical concert. It's how in how long would they feel comfortable going to see a concert. So basically, there is no decrease. Like it's pretty stable. Let's say month over month. So the projected time before you feel you're going to be comfortable going back to a classical concert has been stable. In the last month or so. I don't know that there, and we'll see this actually in just a minute, because if I understand the question correctly, there is maybe also a connection to the very first slide. We'll also see in a minute the combination of missing something and being comfortable going back to something. So
I think that will answer the question.
Exactly. So let me go there if you don't mind, and whoever asked the question on the webinar, if that doesn't answer a question, feel free to ask it again.
Yeah, the other question I got here before you jump into this one was are the numbers adjusted to take into account the numbers of people normally attending an activity? For instance, the green for classical concert is low. Is it because fewer people consume classical concerts?
So no, it's not. And that's a good question, actually, because one thing I should have mentioned is we've only asked, when would you be willing to go back to a classical music concert if you're a consumer of the category. So if you told us early on in the survey that you didn't buy a ticket to a music concert in the last 12 months, we didn't ask you the question of level of comfort or even deprivation. Our assumption is that we wanted to really capture the essence and the mindset of consumers of each category. That means, however, that obviously the size of restaurant, and again, we'll see this in the matrix in just a minute, but the size of the market for the restaurant is much larger than the size of the market for classical music concerts, as an example. And here on this page, they're shown, as if they're equal, but in reality, there are way more consumers of restaurant than there are of classic music concerts.
All right. Got it. Thank you.
All good?
All good.
Let me actually go directly to the matrix because we're in this topic. So basically what we've done then is we've basically mapped two things. One, on the horizontal axis, I'm bad with horizontal and vertical and left and right. So anyways, horizontal axis, you have, the perception of deprivation. So basically, how much do people miss all of those different activities? So right side would be miss a lot, left side don't miss much. And then on the vertical axis, you have how concerned would you be in consuming any of the activities we've looked at before in the next couple months. And so here basically it creates four quadrants, if you'd like. Everything bottom right would be what we call speedier return, because these are activities, and we'll see them in a minute, that people miss a lot and wouldn't be concerned of consuming today. Then on the top right, you have things that people miss a lot, but would be quite concerned to consume today. Then you have bottom left, what we call substitute activities, which are things people don't miss as much, however, wouldn't be worried of consuming today. And then top left, you'd have what we call the high risk activities because they're less consumed, but with a high level of concern. So this creates an interesting challenge for these ones. This is what we got, in the month of April. So basically what we saw is that restaurants in this purple circle, if you'd like, were what people were missing the most and less concerned of consuming in the month of April. Then, by the way, here in this graph, back to the question we just had, John, the size of each bubble is relative to the number of consumers of each category, which is why you would see classical, as an example, much smaller than restaurant, or on the very left side, aquarium, zoo, multimedia experiences, amusement parks, much smaller circles compared to bars and nightclubs in the middle, or movies, or even festivals and concerts. Anyways, back to what I was saying. We had, so basically, restaurants bottom right to some extent. Then you had top right, festivals, concerts, but also theater, classical music, to some extent, even like sports. And then in the middle here, we had bars and nightclubs, comedy, movies, and dance, which were, somewhere in the middle of, a perception of deprivation between miss a lot and don't miss much, somewhere in the middle, and also somewhere in the middle in terms of the level of concern. And then you had those two yellow circles, art museums on the right side and educative museums on the left side, were things that people didn't miss as much, but were also not really concerning for people today. And then the bubbles in blue here are what you could call attractions. And they were basically on the left of the spectrum, of deprivation. And if I show you the evolution, so we'll see, what you'll see next is an animation. It will loop again in case you miss things at the beginning, and you can find that on the website as well if you need. But what you'll see is how did those bubbles move between April and May. So basically, oh, no, sorry. I'm sharing a PDF. So sorry, my apologies. You won't see the movement, but actually if you go on the website, you'll be able to see how those bubbles move. Basically what you'll see is everything has basically moved down and right. So, or most actually of the activities. So basically you'll see visually that the level of concern has decreased for most of them. And basically the level of deprivation has increased. So less concern, more feeling of deprivation for most of those activities. And you'll also see that the 4 red bubbles are starting to bubble up, on the top right corner. And the ones in green are kind of somewhere in the middle. Actually, let me just do, if I can, John, let me know if I do this. Let me know if you'll be able to see my screen.
You want to go to the website directly, or?
Yes, or you can go on the website for those who may not be connected. Do you see my screen now?
I see it.
Yeah. Okay. So you should see the bubbles moving. So basically, you see how these different.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't see the movement of the bubble.
Oh, it's not moving. Okay. So no worries. Anyways, I'll let you guys go on the website and you can see actually the evolution of all those different activities. It's actually quite interesting to see, and we'll do another of those matrix evolution in the month of July.
And that's going to be on the Habo Studio, the website.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
By the way, the question was also asked: are you going to make the presentation available to the participants? Give me a web address for that later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll send to you, John, and you can send that to all the participants of today's presentation. But again, it's a very simplified version of the documents you have on our website, but absolutely, that's going to be available to everyone.
Okay, and the recording will be shared as well.
Marvelous.
Great.
It's like Christmas.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Screen is moving, all good? Okay, perfect. So now that we have a good grasp on the mindset of entertainment consumers in Quebec, let's talk about what could different entertainment activities do to help mitigate the level of concern of consumers. And so we've looked at what could different categories of entertainment do, and we've looked actually at museums and exhibitions. We've looked at any indoor show. sporting events, festivals, and restaurants. What's interesting is they're actually quite different, but somewhat similar, and I'll explain why. The dark green bar here is one thing common to museums, indoor performances, sporting events, and festivals. And that's the idea that consumers are leaning towards a high level of flexibility when it comes to cancellation and refund of tickets. Whether you're looking at indoor shows, sporting events, festivals, the number one mitigation measure that producers or event organizers can implement today is telling consumers that they're going to be able to cancel if anything happens. Both if another wave happens and everything is canceled again. Once, of course, things are back on track, which is how we ask the questions that when things are going to be opening back. But the other thing is also, if I, as a consumer, suddenly don't want to go because I don't feel comfortable, or because I feel sick, or because I have some symptoms and I want to be careful of, not sharing my germs with everyone in an indoor venue, there is a strong demand for flexibility, basically. And that's something that we see in entertainment. It's also something we see in the travel industry. The airline industry has put on some measures, but Airbnb is going through the same thing. Hotels, same idea. There is, and maybe that's going to be something that will stay on for a very long time, and maybe forever, with consumers. That notion of being able to have control on what you buy, and being able to go, not go, cancel, move, change the date, and so on and so forth. So that's basically the common denominator across all those different activities. If we zoom in a bit more, museums and exhibitions is more about a question of the experience. So the museums and exhibitions in overall, and that should certainly include multimedia experiences and things like that, should be able to reassure consumers on the experience they're going to live within their space. So respecting the 2-meter distance rule, a signposted route, access control to avoid long queues, limited number of people. All of this talks about how, as a consumer, I'm going to be experiencing the content in those locations. Indoor shows have actually a very different set of mitigation measures. This is more about the sanitation of the site, so carefully disinfected site, the approval of the public health department, availability of hand sanitizer gel, and to some extent an instant COVID-19 test on site. But as you can see, it's much more about the sanitation of the venue, more so than the experience of consumers. One thing I should mention about the instant COVID-19 test, we've had some really mixed feelings about that one. Actually, it's a very polarizing fact. Here, what you see on this side is people who said it's going to strongly influence my intent to go visit a museum, or to buy a ticket to an indoor performance, or go see a sporting event. So that's basically on the strong influence only, the very strong influence on my intentions. Instant COVID-19 tests are polarizing. You have as many people who would say it would have a very strong positive effect on my intent to go see an indoor show, and as many people, indeed, it had a very negative effect on my intent to see an indoor show. And what we're thinking here is there's a feeling of privacy. Do I want to be tested in front of everyone, and potentially even being said, hey, you can go in because you have some fever or whatever. So this one is a bit tricky to operate. And so if any of you on the webinar are thinking of implementing those measures, especially that one and the last one here, you should be dealt with lots of care.
So are you talking about, taking temperature checks? Or are we talking about taking nose swabs?
So both, and here in this analysis, we didn't go into that level of detail, but it could be either or. But regardless of that, there is something. There is. I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I'm saying we should be careful in how we treat this component of the mitigation measures, because it could be a slippery one and it could actually backfire. So that's one thing to keep in mind. When it comes to sporting events and festivals, actually, they tend to have similar, I'd say, mitigation measures. But the one thing that does make a difference to the, in the head of consumers is the approval of, by the public health department. This is the one thing that really is going to help people go back to sporting events and festivals. So way more than for museums and indoor shows. And yes, indoor shows, was at 29%. So it was still quite strong. It was not, in the top 5 for the museums and exhibitions, but still, this is number 2 for sporting events and festivals. And then as far as sporting events are concerned, carefully disinfected sites, access control to avoid long queues, and gel, availability of gel is definitely something that is going to, reassure consumers of sporting events. Consumers of festivals, so outside of course, so cancellation and the public health department approval, access to control to avoid long queues is also quite strong. The instead COVID-19 test, but also again, polarizing, especially by the way, with younger generations, millennials and Gen Zs, and a respect for the 2-meter distance rule, if that's even possible in a festival.
And I think that was one of the questions about the age demographics, of how the age demographics change across each one of these.
Yeah, so again, so here today, because of the time we have, we didn't go into all that information, but the level of details of information, but it's available. And if you don't see it on our website, if you're asking yourselves questions, if you'd like to know more, feel free to send us an email. We'll be happy to provide data if it's available, or help you the best way we can. So again, I'm opening the door to everyone on the webinar to feel free to contact us and ask questions and details. And if whatever you're working on is specific, to the 1835, we have data that we can certainly help you guys with.
Great, thank you.
And so restaurant, a slightly different story. So the disinfection of the site is very, very crucial for restaurants. That's actually the #1 mitigation measures. The distance between tables, the approval of the public health department, access by time slot to avoid queues, and a limited number of people within the restaurant. So as you can see, yes, some common denominators between all those different types of activities, yet some differences, especially in terms of the ranking of the importance of all of them. So that gives, I think, a good roadmap in terms of, what can I do and what should I focus my communication on? Not saying you shouldn't do all of them, but what I communicate to the consumer could be influenced by those insights. All good? Yeah, I'm going to move on to the last section of today's webinar. Of course, if you have questions, feel free to continue asking them on the chat, which will be now about the question of, so now can I monetize online events? And I don't know whether it's relevant to all of you guys, or maybe more so for some than for others, but there are still some very interesting learning in this question of monetization of online events. The truth is, so this section comes from discussions with our clients who said, well, can I shift towards online? As an example, we're working with Multicolor, the company that oversees Picnic Electronic. And of course, a picnic in the park, the Jean Drapeau Park, this summer is yet, for now at least, not a question in terms of possibility. They shifted towards picnic at home. But their question was, can I monetize? Should I ask people to pay? Yes, no, how much, for what kind of events? So what we see first is, and that was quite surprising, in April, 33%, so basically 1/3 of entertainment consumers had attended an online event since the beginning of COVID-19, which was way higher than what we personally would have expected. So basically it's 1/3 of consumers. If you ask yourself, because the question was, quite open-ended, but we then asked them, okay, what kind of event was this? And actually the open-ended answers are very coherent, and it's not, people that didn't really understand the question. So it's really like a third of the consumers in April, which went up to 40% in May. So it's a pretty significant number of people. We also were expecting the penetration of online events to be much higher with younger demographics, but actually in reality, no. It's actually very coherent and consistent across all age groups. yes, it's a bit higher for millennials at 46%, but it's actually still a 35% for baby boomers. So still says a lot about, how consumers did shift, towards online for the lack of consuming something else.
Were they categorized as either paid or free?
So this was paid and free altogether.
Okay.
And actually, yeah, so it was paid and free altogether. And I'll go back to that question in a second, John. Sorry, that's why I'm thinking, should I talk about that now? I'll go back to that in a minute. And then we've also looked at which platform did you use to consume those online events. And so Facebook is #1 by far. So in April, 45% of market share, if you'd like, 38% in May. By the way, this data is actually new. You won't find this on the website. Actually, it's going to be published next week, early next week. So that's kind of a preview to all of you guys today, but it will be available on the website very soon. And when you look at generations in terms of those different platforms, millennials and Gen X are really much about Facebook. Gen Zs are way more about Instagram when it comes to consuming online events. So there are differences. Instagram is almost absent for baby boomers, so 1% of the consumption. So interesting to see where they consumed that entertainment. But then we've asked ourselves, okay, well, can we ask people to pay for an online event? And here, before you look at the results, let me just tell you a bit of a story of how we came with this methodology. In the month of April, you'll find actually this data on the report online. You'll see that we had a question that was broad. We said, okay, did you attend an event? Yes, no. Would you be willing to pay for an online event? Certainly, probably not, and certainly not. But we actually had a broad category of just an online event overall. And the answer was a bit worrying for companies like Just for Laughs or all those companies trying to monetize content online, because the answer was 8% of consumers were certainly willing to pay. And then you had a 40-something% that was probably willing to pay. So that was a bit concerning to see that only 8% of consumers are actually willing to pay for an online event. What we've done in the month of May, which we'll continue doing in the month of June, is actually we broke down that question by category of consumption, because what we realized is your willingness to pay to see online content from a museum, from a small artist, is not the same as a comedy show or a live music concert. And what we see now in the month of May is that the likelihood of consumers or propensity of consumers to pay for online events is actually quite solid for comedy shows, live music concerts, classical concerts, plays to some extent. And then you drop for festivals way lower, probably because consuming an online festival is probably not as appealing to consumers. But there is room for monetization for basically things that people are used to paying for in their daily life, right? So that's quite interesting. On the other end, as I was saying, museums, very difficult to monetize the content for museums, which is probably a factor of one, what am I going to pay for? And two, there is already lots of art, design, educative content available online for free. So why would I pay for that? And what's interesting in terms of what we call psychological price for an online event, in the month of April, the sweet spot, the psychological price was around $16 approximately. And this went up to close to $20 in the month of May. So whether it's a question of the sample, that's a possibility, maybe June will go back to closer to 16, we'll see. Or it's a factor of just, I've been exposed to more content and now I see the value of the content and my willingness to pay is increasing. We'll see. That's the beauty of this research. This basically gives us an evolution of consumers' mindset in the next couple months, and we'll see, what is happening in the world versus what is happening in their heads. How does those two things collide and create something powerful? So last thing, we've also looked at, well, are online events here to stay? And now that consumers have consumed an online event, would they feel that this can replace what they've lived live? And that actually came from discussions with some of our clients who said, you know what, maybe I'll never return to live. Maybe I'll create a whole new business model around online, and that's all I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. So the question was, is this a viable proposition to consumers? What we see is that still, despite, a level of interest for online events, 76% of consumers today, I'm not saying that that won't evolve, but today, 3 people out of 4 are going to tell you that attending an online event will never replace attending it in person in a performance hall. It's not a surprise, yet we needed to have, that measurement to validate the assumption. Whether online events are a temporary alternative while waiting for venues to reopen, probably as well, but maybe not as strongly. So maybe online events will remain an alternative at some point, but not to replace the physical experience whatsoever. So this was interesting, again, to see, just to understand how do people behave and feel towards this question of entertainment, live versus online. And so for now, at least, the answer is that online will never replace live, but is a good kind of interim solution for now. But we don't yet see signs that, online will become the thing, and that will be, attending entertainment in the future in a complete virtual world. Again, as Henry Ford once said, if I had asked my consumers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, i.e. consumers are not here to detect, trends and future needs. It's our roles as creators and entrepreneurs to help them, in the right direction. Yet today, the physical experience still prevails. So that wraps it up for today. We have time for questions. I think we have about 10 minutes. If you have any other questions, anything you'd like to know about this document, this content, what we do at Habo, or anything else, happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions here outstanding on the chat line. One is interesting. Considering all the work that you've done and all the studies you've done, what do you think will be the long-lasting or permanent changes in the industry? And then, do you have any intuition on the solutions to respond to these changes that are happening?
I think so. First, I wish I had the answer to that question, because I'd be very rich. And what I can see is trends, basically. So what we see is currently, well, live still, definitely something that, will come back in terms of consumer appetite. I think that notion of flexibility is something that is a real challenge for most people in the industry, outside of like museums and things like that. But like, think of concerts, sporting events, circus performances, and name it, like theater. This notion of flexibility is a real issue. And I think this will be something that could be more of a permanent change that we should be thinking of today. I feel that at least for the next 12 to 18 months, smaller experiences are gonna be privileged by consumers. I also believe, and that's something we're working on with our clients a lot, that unless you, of course, when you're a theater, it's difficult to play around the space so much. But like when you're like an immersive experience, an aquarium, a zoo, or whatever, name it, you can actually create an experience based on the premise of the current constraints. So that's something we're doing a lot in terms of product development with our clients. And that's something that, you may need to sell for the next 12 to 18 months until things are back to a normal. Now, what will be the new normal is frankly very hard to say today. And we're tracking this, regularly with, in Quebec, but also abroad. But it's difficult to have a very specific answer for now.
Okay. I think the other question was being asked about, looking at a number of events that are asking for donations as a means of raising funds. And the example was being used, the Montreal drag queens example, collected thousands of dollars as donations to their free events on both Facebook and YouTube. What's been your experience in really understanding the donation collection process and how it impacts the quality of the product?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen is it's a question of emotional relationship with the brand in question. So there are some brands, experiences, events that have a very strong emotional connection. So like a drag show probably has a very strong community of followers, and the more your relationship with your community was high, the easier it is to actually basically ask for donations for whatever you're presenting. Same thing with gyms. You know, we saw gyms giving classes online. The more your crowd was connected to what you did before COVID, and that emotional attachment to what you meant and you represented as an organization, the easier it is to actually convert them into dollars. But ultimately, for me, this goes back to what we just said about monetization. Whether it's donation or ticket that you pay or whatever else, it remains in the realm of monetization. It's just a different shape and form. But it's all about community, I think, when it comes to donations.
So my last question for you is, ask, how would a leader of a creative organization use this barometer to develop his or her own strategy of reopening the business post-COVID?
Yeah. So for me, what Insights is basically your Google map, right? So we're in Montreal, we want to go to Quebec City or vice versa. You can take the 20, you can take the 40. Basically, the Insights basically give you different indication points of information or indication points on the road. Is there a traffic jam on the 40? Is there a construction on the 20? Which one will be faster, slower? What you should be careful of, in one or the other. But it will never tell you, should you take the 40 or the 20 to go from Montreal to Quebec City. So here, I think the use of this analysis is there's a couple things. One, the worst thing that can happen today to creative organizations is to be disconnected from their marketplace. And consumers, markets, prospects, name it, clients, even more importantly, it's really important to keep your hand on the pulse of consumers. So that's, I think, one use of this. Number two is because of its because it's a tracking and it's going to be happening every month. We'll be able to see as a society the evolution of those metrics. One thing that we see, actually quite interestingly, there's another organization that did somewhat of a similar analysis in Canada overall. They're called Business and Arts. And what you see is Quebecers are way more likely to go back to entertainment quickly, as opposed to Ontarians or people in BC. They're way less worried. So there's also a different, I think Quebec is kind of its own bubble to some extent versus Canada. In terms of consumer behavior, and that's not true for everything, but in terms of consumer behavior, definitely, and with the virus especially. So it's really making sure that we track the evolution of those metrics in the next couple of weeks and adjust our strategies accordingly, basically.
Good. A couple of last questions here. Talking about some of the participants that people have tried their online events, things like music workshops. People tend to avoid spending more time in front of their computers after working from home. That there's basically a burnout that takes place in terms of doing online events after everybody's been working from home online. Is that have you measured that burnout aspect of it in terms of some of your questions to your audience?
We have not. However, intuitively, I'm not sure it's a real issue. I think first. Whether people are working from home or working, from the office, I mean, you're spending a big chunk of your day behind a screen. So I don't know that it makes such a big difference. And I think, even if consumers tell you I'm tired of screens, they'll still go and binge Netflix afterwards. So for me, it's more of a question of the value you bring to customers, clients, audience members, more so than the screen. I think if what you're offering has value, consumers are going to be sacrificing maybe other things to consume the content you're creating. So it's all about the product. It's all about that.
And question about the size of the market or your respondents. Was this only a database from La Point de Vente? Was it sent to other audiences as well, or could it be sent to other audiences?
Yeah, so it's only Point de Vente. However, they have a few hundred thousands of names. So basically, we could have worked with a panelist to do this project. but they have access to way more ticket buyers or entertainment consumers than any panel provider would have. And because we're doing this, every month, and we're surveying different people every month, so the goal is not to ask the same question to the same people every month. We needed to have a very, very large base to work with. And that's why we went the route of going with a non-panel, however, that was already pre-qualified in consumer entertainment, entertainment consumer, and also that we could actually put quota around to structure the data so it represents the Quebec population.
And so one last question, I think a couple of questions, same thought, but this new normal. So when is the new normal going to happen, and when are we going to get back to to active in live theater?
So, well, again, I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I had. What we see, and again, looking forward to seeing the results of June, because we're in field as we speak. So that's, we're in field as everything else is reopening. So it will certainly reassure consumers. We'll see how that tracks, because there's what the government will allow and what consumers are going to be willing to do. Today, we're as I said earlier at the beginning of the presentation, we're working on Broadway. Broadway is very concerned about the return, and we're actually looking at November at the earliest, most probably January, if not March 2021. But there's a different behavior. Consumers are older. They're also in the US, where the situation is different. So I think it will also depend on the geographical, the location you're in, basically. But it's difficult. I think all we can is actually track the evolution of consumers. But again, keep in mind that there is still, a section of the marketplace that today would be going back to any entertainment activity. So it's not true that everyone is at home afraid of potential risks towards their health.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Florent, for your time.
My pleasure.
Very, very informative session. Much appreciated. I think we had a lot of interesting questions coming up from our participants. Once again, it's been a pleasure having you. So what I'd like to be able to do is just introduce people to, our program at McGill, and talk to you a bit about, what the program's all about. It's, an executive program in creative industries and the professional development certificate. We're basically giving you a bunch of ideas in terms of what it is that we can do in terms of different aspects of production. So you have a professional development certificate for creative industries and 4 specializations that we have. So I'll probably give you the website that's there, and I'll put it on the chat line and for you to have a look at. So thank you very much once again for your time, and Florent, for a very, very interesting presentation. And we look forward to the ability to see you once again in some of our next presentations. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And have a great weekend, and everybody stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.